are watching Cam Science.
As we had already seen in our earlier video that chromatography is one of the experimental techniques. So the IGCSE chemistry topic chromatography we'll be learning this time in detail. Let's also understand what is RF value, and let's also see what are locating agents in relevance with chromatography. So chromatography is an analyzing technique. It's not a separating technique. So with the help of chromatography, we can just analyze and find out that what substance do we have. So when the mixture of colored solids or even colorless solids are mixed, this technique is used to identify its presence by comparing the RF value with the raw data. Now let's understand what is chromatography in detail. For that, we need a chromatogram, or you can say a chromatography paper. Chromatogram is also called it as. Now chromatography paper is a kind of filter paper which can absorb solvents. So such a paper is taken. Now we need to put a drop of a mixture of the colored solids which we are going to analyze. The mixture of colored solids dissolved in proper solvent. Now dissolved in proper solvent in the sense we need to choose a solvent in which the mixture solids which we have taken should dissolve. Now that can be water or any organic solvent like propanol or ethanol. That are few common organic solvents like propanol or ethanol. We can also use aqueous solvent like water, but we need to see that the solids which we are analyzing should dissolve in this solvent. So the solvent is needed, chromatogram paper is needed. On the paper we are going to put the mixture of solids dissolved in a solvent, and then we will also need a solvent for performing the chromatography. Now let's understand how do we do all that. Now here you can see that the chromatography paper is dipped into a solvent. Here the solvent is taken into a beaker, and we can also see that in chromatography the baseline is drawn with the pencil. Now let's understand what is a baseline. Baseline is the one which we have drawn at the bottom. So here is the baseline. Now baseline is drawn always with the pencil, and no other substance should be used like ink or ball pen, gel pen should not be used to draw the baseline. So the reason being is that when we are performing the chromatography, no other substance should participate in the chromatography. So pencil, that is lead, is the substance which doesn't dissolve in the solvent and doesn't participate in the chromatography. So that's the reason that we are drawing the baseline with the pencil. Now let's understand this, that we are drawing the baseline with the pencil because it should not participate in the chromatography along with the mixture of the solids which we have taken for analyzing. Yeah, so let's start. In the beaker here we have taken a suitable solvent like water. Here we can see that we have kept the drop of the mixture of solids which we are analyzing. So the drop is kept on the baseline. Now understand that the level of the solvent, should be below the baseline. So baseline should lie above the solvent. The reason being is that the mixture which we have taken should remain above the solvent so that it can travel upward in the chromatography paper. Otherwise it's going to dissolve in the solvent directly in the beaker, which we don't want. So this is how we are going to set our chromatography apparatus. That is, take a chromatography paper, draw a baseline with a pencil, and put a drop of mixture which we are analyzing on the baseline. Dip it into a proper solvent and allow it to stand for some time. After some time we will observe that there will be few drops or the spots of the colored substances or the spots of the mixture which we have taken is seen on the chromatography paper at different level. And we'll also see that when these spots are separating, the solvent is going to travel more than these spots, and we can see that the level of the solvent will be higher than these spots. So this, the level at which the solvent has traveled, is called solvent front. So solvent front is the level at which the solvent, or the distance at which the solvent has traveled, and which is always going to be greater than the mixture or the substances under analyzing. So this is how we note down everything. After this, you can take out the chromatography paper, and then what we are going to do is calculate the distance or measure the distance traveled by these different spots. After noting down all this, the next step is to calculate the RF value. Now what is RF value? RF value is the ratio of the distance traveled by solute to the distance traveled by the solvent. So let's try the formula of RF value, that is distance traveled by solute divided by the distance traveled by solvent. Now we can measure this once the chromatography is performed. Now what's the distance traveled by the solvent? The distance here, the difference between the highest level of the solvent traveled to the distance up to the baseline. Now so this is the distance traveled by the solvent, and the distance traveled by each and every solute will be different. Now the first one, from the midpoint to the center of the spot or the baseline. Now this is the distance traveled by the first solute. The distance traveled by the second solute will be different because the red spot has traveled a different distance. So the RF value for all the three substances can be calculated separately, and then it can be compared to the raw data. Raw data is the collection of the RF values of different organic as well as inorganic substances. So then we can calculate the RF value for different substances and then compare it with the RF value of the raw data to find out that what are the substances present. Now other than that, as mentioned at the starting of the video, we had also seen that the chromatography can be used for colorless substances also. Now colorless substances is the difference which will be created by the chromatography of the colorless substances, that once the chromatography is performed, the colored spots won't be visible. Here we can see that there are blue, red and green spots here, but the colorless spots won't be visible. So what we can do is, one certain distance is traveled by the solvent. We see that the solvent has traveled certain distance. We can stop it. Then we can dry the chromatogram, and then the colored spots won't be visible. So we will spray the chromatogram with the locating agents. Now what are locating agents? Locating agents are the substances which will make the colorless substances visible. So what are locating agents? Locating agents are the substances which will make the colorless spots visible after performing the chromatography. One of the best example is ninhydrine. Ninhydrine is one of the best locating agent which is generally used for locating amino acids after the chromatography of the amino acids. That is, the proteins are hydrolyzed into amino acids, and to identify which amino acids are present, we spray the chromatogram with the locating agent ninhydrine. This will make the spots visible with some color, and then we can again calculate the RF value for different spots. So this is how we can use chromatography for analyzing the mixture of substances, whether organic or inorganic, whether colored or colorless substances, and this is an analyzing technique.